Not that that, justifies my behavior
Yeah,
at all.
no,
I
of
would just
course.
say, you're asking what did I learn? And it's that we just got to be nice to each other, man. It's like, it's hard. And I guess the thing that was most painful for me is I took my hard and made it hard for other people.
Right.
And it's like I understood the idea when they say hurt people hurt people.
Yeah. Yeah.
30 years to build a perfect image, 10 seconds to tear it all down. After Oscar Night 2022, the world branded Will Smith a violent man. But is that the truth? The answer isn't in the slap, but in what was suppressed for the past 40 years. This is the story of the scars that never healed. The ones that turned Hollywood's most beloved star into the man who set his own legacy on fire. To understand this pain, we have to go back in time to West Philadelphia, 1977, where a 9-year-old boy learned to survive by wearing a smile as a mask. The roots, the fateful moment at age 9. Willard Carroll Smith Jr. was born on September 25, 1968, in West Philadelphia. This wasn't the Philadelphia of history books or the Liberty Bell. This was a world of cracked sidewalks, where hope was often overshadowed by the harsh lessons of survival. His father, Willard Sr., was a refrigeration engineer. He wasn't cruel in the conventional sense. He went to work, brought home a paycheck, and attended church every Sunday. But inside the house, he was a different entity, a volatile presence waiting to erupt, forcing the entire family to hold their breath, to read his moods before daring to speak. His mother, Caroline Bright, was a school administrator who tried to cultivate discipline and love in an atmosphere thick with tension. One evening, when Will was 9, that volatility took form. His father punched his mother squarely in the face. She bled. The boy stood frozen in the living room. He didn't scream, he didn't run, and he didn't call for help. He just stood there, paralyzed. That moment, which lasted only a few seconds in that small West Philadelphia home, became the foundational scar of his entire life. In his 2021 memoir, Will Smith confessed that this was the moment that defined him. Every bright smile, every heroic role he would later play, was, in the end, an attempt to atone for the 9-year-old boy who stood helplessly by as his mother was hurt. During those turbulent childhood years, his paternal grandmother, Helen Bright, was his only anchor. She kept a small notebook, meticulously writing down every prayer for her grandchildren. She was the first to plant a seed of confidence in him, saying, "Boy, you have a gift. You don't waste it." At Overbrook High School, Will wasn't the top student, but he was the most charismatic. His teachers nicknamed him Prince, not because of royalty, but because of his unique ability to charm his way out of trouble. He could make a mistake, then have the teacher laughing and dismissing the punishment moments later. That was when Will learned a harsh truth. A smile wasn't just an expression, it was a weapon. It was the first piece of the iron mask he would wear for the next half-century. The boy, Will, had learned to use charm to survive. But neither he nor the world knew that this life-saving skill would later become the very prison that confined his soul. The first gamble and the painful fall. At 17, Will Smith faced a choice that most kids in his neighborhood could only dream of. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, had shown interest in him. His mother wanted him to go to college. On paper, it was the safest path a black kid from West Philadelphia could take. Will chose the microphone. It was the first major gamble of his life, and it almost destroyed him. At Overbrook, he met Jeffrey Towns, later known to the world as DJ Jazzy Jeff. They weren't the most talented guys in the neighborhood, but when they got together, they created an energy no one else could match. In 1988, their song, Parents Just Don't Understand, won the Grammy for Best Rap Performance. It was the first ever Grammy in this category. At 19, Will Smith's name was etched into the record books. But something strange happened in the moments after that career high. In the first few hours after the ceremony, when he should have been celebrating, Will experienced his first ever panic attack. Not joy, not euphoria, fear. a fear that psychologists would later call achievement anxiety. Every time he climbed higher, a voice in his head would whisper, "If you can't hold on to this, everyone will leave you." But at 19, no one taught him how to name that feeling. He did the only thing he knew how. He tried to fill the void. He bought luxury cars. He bought jewelry. He maintained an entourage that followed him everywhere. He believed the money would never run out. By 1990, the IRS sent a cold, hard notice. Will Smith owed nearly $3 million in back taxes. His cars were repossessed. His assets were frozen. The entourage vanished within weeks. At 21, he stood in front of the mirror in an empty apartment, with nothing left. And then, a phone call would change everything. But not in the way you think. Rebirth on the small screen and a glimpse of real pain. The call came from Quincy Jones. The legendary producer saw something in Will Smith that others hadn't: an ability to command a room with his presence alone, without relying on lines. Quincy offered him the lead role in an NBC sitcom. Will almost turned it down. He wasn't confident in his acting. He was terrified of failing again. It was the IRS debt that made the decision for him. On September 10th, 1990, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air premiered. Within one season, America fell in love with the kid from West Philadelphia, sent to live with his wealthy relatives in Bel-Air. The audience laughed, but they didn't know that behind the funny lines, something raw was waiting to be exposed. In the show's fourth season, in 1994, the script called for a special scene. In the episode, Will's biological father, played by Ben Vereen, returns, makes promises, and then abandons him again. The character of Will tries to maintain a tough exterior. He smiles, he jokes, he deflects. But at the end of the scene, when James Avery, who played Uncle Phil, looks at him and waits, all his defenses crumble. He asks a single question. "How come he don't want me, man?" The scene was filmed in a single take. There was no second. After the cameras cut, James Avery wrapped Will in a hug and didn't let go. The entire crew behind the lens stood silent, many of them in tears. Years later, a reporter asked Will how he prepared for that scene. Will replied that he hadn't prepared at all. In that moment, he wasn't playing a character. He was the 9-year-old boy, asking his own father the question he never dared to ask. The funniest sitcom on American television in the 90s had, for him, become a public therapy session he didn't know he needed. 6 seasons and 148 episodes later, The Fresh Prince ended. Will Smith walked off the set in Burbank, ready for something bigger. Over the next 15 years, he would break every record. His global box office would exceed $5 billion. He'd earn 2 Oscar nominations. He would build an empire. But if he had it all, why would he later call this period the peak of his dishonesty? The answer lies in a strange moment at the edge of the Grand Canyon. The Hollywood empire and a bizarre spiritual experience. Bad Boys came out in 1995. Independence Day, in 1996, became one of the highest-grossing films in history at the time. Men in Black followed in 1997. Ali in 2001 earned him his first Oscar nomination. His salary climbed to $20 million per film. The cumulative global box office of his movies surpassed $5 billion. By 2006, Will Smith was in front of the camera for The Pursuit of Happiness, co-starring with his real-life son, Jaden, who was then just 8 years old. The most talked-about scene is when the father and son hide for the night in a public restroom at a subway station. The father holds his son, telling him everything will be okay, even though he knows nothing is. That scene earned Will his second Oscar nomination. Years later, he admitted something few viewers would have guessed. He didn't have to act in that scene. The fear of not being a good enough father, he had lived with that fear since he was 9. His career at that point was a straight line upward, with no descent. But the higher he climbed, the tighter something inside him became. In September 2018, for his 50th birthday, Will organized an event live-streamed on YouTube. He bungee jumped from a helicopter hovering over the Grand Canyon. In the 4 seconds of free fall, he felt something he would never forget. He called it the moment he saw God. After that, he began participating in spiritual ceremonies using ayahuasca, a hallucinogenic substance used in South American traditions. In a later talk, he described those experiences with a short sentence. He had faced the hell within himself. In hindsight, it wasn't a random exploration. It was a warning sign. A part of him knew something was wrong long before the slap in 2022, but he didn't know how to stop. Because, as he stood at the pinnacle of his career, he didn't realize he was also at his furthest from his family. The boy who had learned that silence was dangerous could not stop performing, even for his own wife and children. Inside his own home, Will Smith was still playing to an audience. And that audience was the woman he had married in 1997. The marriage, the untold truth. In 1990, Jada Pinkett auditioned for the role of Lisa on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. She did not get the part because the director thought she was too short for Will Smith, but she did get Will's attention. 7 years later, on December 31st, 1997, they were married. To the public, it looked like a perfect Hollywood wedding. But the truth was much darker. The night before the ceremony, Jada called her mother and said, "I don't want to get married." She was pregnant with Jaden, both families had arrived, and everything was already arranged. Her mother told her she had to go through with it. Jada later admitted on Red Table Talk that she cried walking down the aisle, and they were not tears of joy. She said she never believed in marriage and never truly wanted to be married. For years, Will and Jada were seen as the model Hollywood couple, but behind the image, they were slowly growing apart. By 2016, they were separated in practice, though not legally. That meant when Will defended her on Oscar night, they were no longer living as a traditional married couple. Then came the 2020 Red Table Talk. Jada confirmed her relationship with August Alsina and called it an entanglement, a word that instantly became a meme. The internet mocked them, while Will sat beside her, painfully composed. But behind that public humiliation was something heavier. Reports later claimed August had threatened suicide if Jada did not speak publicly. Will agreed to appear not just to protect their image, but to prevent a tragedy. He swallowed the humiliation for Jada and for another man. Will thought that was rock bottom. But 18 months later, he would learn it was only the beginning. The night of March 27, 2022. 10 fateful seconds. The 94th Academy Awards were supposed to be Will Smith's coronation. His film King Richard had swept the major pre-Oscar awards. Everyone expected him to win Best Actor. That night, he arrived with Jada, who wore an emerald green dress and sat beside him in the front row. On camera, they looked calm, united, and happy. Then Chris Rock walked on stage to present Best Documentary Feature. Looking at Jada, he improvised a joke. "Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2. Can't wait to see it." The joke was not in the script. Chris later said he did not know Jada had alopecia, a condition that causes hair loss. But in that moment, the damage was already done. At first, Will laughed. Then he looked at Jada. She was not laughing. Her face showed pain. Something inside him snapped. Will later connected that moment to a childhood memory from 1977, when he watched his father hit his mother and did nothing. For years, he carried the guilt of being unable to protect her. Now, in front of the world, he stood up, walked onto the stage, and slapped Chris Rock. The theater went silent. Chris did not hit back. Will returned to his seat and shouted twice, "Keep my wife's name out of your fucking mouth." During the commercial break, Denzel Washington, Tyler Perry, and Bradley Cooper tried to calm him down backstage. Denzel warned him, "At your highest moment, be careful. That's when the devil comes for you." Will asked if he should leave. But the organizers told him to stay because he was likely to win Best Actor. 40 minutes later, his name was called. He returned to the same stage, accepted his first Oscar, cried, and compared himself to Richard Williams as a man protecting his family. But to much of the world, the speech felt painfully out of touch. What should have been the greatest night of his career had already become the moment that changed everything. Exile, silence, and the journey to face himself. The fall came with horrifying speed. Projects were canceled, phone calls stopped, and doors in Beverly Hills slammed shut. After decades of living in the center of adoration, Will Smith was forced to confront the one thing he feared most: his own silence. He flew to India, with no entourage and no press release. At a secluded retreat, he met a monk who had no idea who he was. When asked, "Who are you?" Will reflexively answered, "I'm Will Smith, an actor." The monk shook his head. "That's what you do. I'm asking who you are." For 50 years, it was the first time Will didn't have an answer. Every label, Grammy winner, Oscar winner, Hollywood icon, fell under the category of a role. The silence was no longer a fear, but the beginning of healing. Tyler Perry, one of the few friends who didn't turn his back, reached out to him during those dark days. Tyler spoke of trees. The taller the tree, the stronger the wind. But it's that wind that forces the roots to dig deeper into the earth. That metaphor anchored Will through the darkest nights. The journey also led him back to confront the shadow of his father. Will remembered his final days, caring for his father on his deathbed. The man who was once a source of terror was now frail, and no longer recognized his own son. In that moment, the resentment dissolved. He realized his father wasn't a monster, but just a man carrying his own unnamed traumas. Understanding that, Will stopped letting the wound from his past define his future. Now, every morning in the mirror, Will asks himself 3 questions. What am I running from? Who am I performing for? And if there were no audience, would I still be doing this? They aren't questions that can be answered in a day, but they are questions he must face every day. The mirror. His career did not end, though it once looked like it might. Emancipation came out in late 2022 to a cautious response. Then Bad Boys, Ride or Die arrived in 2024 and earned over $400 million worldwide. Part of the audience was still willing to watch Will Smith. His fortune is still estimated at around $350 million. But when Will talks about money now, he sounds like a man who knows wealth can protect you from discomfort, but it cannot heal pain. His story is not a fairy tale. There is no perfect ending. There was once a 9-year-old boy who watched his father hit his mother and did nothing. 44 years later, there was a 53-year-old man who stood up at the Oscars and did something. But did he fix the past? Or did he become the very man that little boy promised he would never be? Will Smith is not different because he is broken. Millions of people carry wounds like his. He is different because his wound opened in front of the entire world, on live television, during what should have been the greatest night of his life. And that is why this story is not only about Will Smith. It is a mirror. It reflects anyone who has built a life around performance instead of truth. Anyone who keeps chasing success to avoid facing pain. Anyone who loves someone, yet still makes them feel unseen. This story is not asking what you think about Will Smith. It is asking what his story reveals about you. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who may also be wearing a suit of armor, and leave a comment. Which moment made you pause? Because the best stories are never only about the person on screen. They are about the person watching. Thanks for being here.